Last segment, we talked a lot about the selection of the area for a food plot, and then also how do you then get rid of the existing vegetation. And we're going to look at our demonstration plot that we have here, and you can see that what we did in preparation for our next steps here has worked quite well. We have a giant brown spot where we sprayed the glyphosate on the grass and have succeeded in killing the existing vegetation. So the next step comes in of what do we do, right? So we killed the vegetation, now we got to get something growing in that plot. So we have to select a seed for what we want to plant in this food plot. And I just stopped by a local retailer, took a picture of what they had for options, and as you can see, there's a lot. And this isn't even at an ag store, this is just a general merchandise store. So we need to cover a little bit about what's out there, what you should think about in selecting a seed, and what are the things when you pick a seed, what are the options.
The first thing to consider is there are two major growing seasons, warm versus cold. Warm being something like corn, cold being something like winter wheat.
Remember, there's no advantage for one or the other, it's just when they grow and when they're more available for wildlife to consume. After that, based on your situations, you may decide to go with something like a throw and go that's easy to plant, that you don't have to do as much work for bed preparation, or you can go with a single species of seed for your plot, or the last option being that you go with a mixture of seeds for the plot. The advantage of the mixture is you're putting a lot of options on their dinner plate per se, right? You have a buffet there instead of just a single species there that is nutritionally better off at one point in time. Now, there's both cool and warm season options you'll see here in a second. Now, this is a cool season option with a bunch of different things going on. Here's a warm season option that has soybeans, cowpeas, sorghum, and buckwheat. There's a couple things to look at when you look at a tag and things that you need to pay attention to.
Firstly, you always want to know what is in the actual bag and by what percentage. That way you have an idea of what you're putting in the ground. Next, you plant seeds at a pound per acre rate, and that's suggested to you. So the thing that you need to know is how many live seeds you're actually putting in the ground, and that's referred to as the germination rate. So if you have a low germination rate, below 90% or so, you may need to add more pounds of seed to get a successful stand in that location. Lastly, you want to look at what you're going to plant and make sure you do some research on how deep that needs to be in the ground. And also pay attention to other things on the packages, recommendations by the manufacturer of what you need to pay attention to while you're trying to get these established. That brings of actual preparing the bed and then finally planting them. And there's many tools that you need and can use to plant a bed. First and foremost, you're looking at some way of moving dirt around, whether that be a full-on disc from a tractor or the setup we have, which is a much smaller disc and cultivator combo. You can get away with anything that can move dirt, even a rake, but generally a disc is a common item. Now, if we look back at our plot, you can see we have a big brown spot with dead vegetation. Now, if we went through there and threw seed out, we may get some things to grow, but in order to maximize seed growth and success, what we want to do is use that disc, that cultipacker, and increase the amount of soil that's broken up so that the seed roots can really get down there, get to nutrients, and also, first and foremost, make sure that we have the most seed to soil contact as possible so that there's a lot of dirt there that'll accept the seed when it gets spread out and it'll contact the soil, get wet, and that will initiate the growth of those seeds. What we're really doing here is we're taking our time, we're using our disc, we're driving around the plot, and this may take a while to actually break it up well enough to get that bed in good shape, but we're just taking our time and moving dirt. Use the tool that we have and actually break that ground up and loosen that dirt up. And you'll notice when it's set, because when you pick the dirt up, it'll kind of crumble in your hand. Now, remember that soil test we took last time? This is when we're going to actually make those adjustments needed. Now, you should have gotten results back from your ag agent, and they'll make a recommendation to you on what you should do to that soil based on what you tell them you think you're going to plant. So knowing what seeds you want to plant is going to help them make a recommendation to how to make that soil meet those needs. Now, in terms of tools that you need to get that out into the ground, there's a couple options. There's a simple spreader that you can either push or pull. That is for smaller scales. Now, you can get into the larger industrial size or even have someone come out and actually lay ag line down if you need to. However, a small one should suffice. And really all you're doing is you're taking what's recommended, putting it inside of the spreader. It can be combined, and you're going to want to try to play around with a little bit of how quick that comes out of the spreader. and do a pass with a little amount of material in it, paying attention to how it's spreading it out across the field, whether you're getting good distribution, or if you need to start playing with how quick it's coming out to make sure you're getting good coverage through the entire plot. Now, have a conversation with your ag agent about your amendment here. You may have things that you add on to your soil that really need to be worked into the soil a little bit. So that would call for you to, once you finish adding the fertilizer, to actually put that disc back on there and maybe make a couple passes through again to really work that into the ground to increase its effectiveness. Now that our soil is primed, now we need to start thinking about actually planting our seed. And there's a couple tools to use, including something like a hand crank, or even just tossing seed out in the field itself. Or you can go more industrial, like using a no-till drill. But the big thing here is that you are walking that seed, spreading it, and getting good coverage throughout the entire plot. And you need to do that in a way that's comfortable, that you feel you're successful. Now, for larger seeds, you can actually use that tool that we have there for the spreader for the soil amendment and place that in there and get a good coverage throughout. We're actually spreading winter wheat using that tool, and it is spraying it at a high enough rate that we'll have a successful plot. Now that all the seed is spread, we need to think about how do we increase that seed to soil contact. And that's where the cultipacker comes in. And what this basically does is it's pushing down on the soil and whatever's sitting on top of the soil to increase that soil to seed contact. And it primes that bed, it makes it look nice and even, spreads it out. It's going to spread out the fertilizer a little bit too. And you can see here's a couple of pictures of seed and fertilizer all sitting next to each other. And hopefully, after that's all said and done, you're sitting there fingers crossed for some rain. Now that's the end of this segment. Next segment will include how to maintain the plot and gauging success, and what happens when something goes wrong. Can you do something to fix it to hopefully still have a successful plot?